Welcome everyone to week 2 of our Parent Ed and Connection Time. And this week we have Mark Ainley with us as our guest speaker and presenter. And I'm going to introduce Mark, and he's going to take some time to present. And then there are some questions that really I'm dying to ask. And we may have more parents popping into the meeting as we go and record. So just to be aware that people might be joining us as we go. So in the New York Times best-selling book, Atomic Habits, James Clear states that your environment is the #1 factor impacting your behavior. When your surroundings are aligned with the task at hand, you and your work are supported. And when not well designed, your space can create friction between you and your envisioned goals. So Mark Ainley is a flow optimization specialist, and he's going to present us with some common sense tips for enhancing students' workspaces so that they can not only be functional, but also inspiring and motivating. We'll have, like I said, some Q&A afterwards as well. And Mark has over 20 years now of international experience, both adjusting home and work environments, teaching professionals that work in the design field, as well as working with individuals in their family homes and workspaces. So I just must also share that Mark has worked with my family and our home in two different homes over the years. And I cannot impress upon you how instant the shift was in terms of the clarity of our own thinking, the support, our ability to rest and relax in our home, as well as being organized. And Mark has also supported Eaton Arrowsmith School a few times over the years, helping us with classroom design and setup to optimize student focus and work, as well as us as professionals in our workspace. So I'm very grateful for Mark being here today to be able to share some of this with you all. So Mark, welcome. Thank you for taking the time with us.
Real pleasure to be here.
And I'll turn it over to you.
Fantastic, thank you. So yeah, thanks for the introduction. And you know, my training is in Feng Shui, and I really like to present that because there's so many stereotypes and so many beliefs around what Feng Shui is. And really it's just about what that quote from James Clear says. This is just about being attuned and being in sync with your environment. When your environment is supporting you, whatever it is that you're wanting to do in that environment has more support. And when things are out of sync, then you're going to feel out of sync, and it feels a little bit more like an uphill battle. The thing that I want to stress before I even start going into details is we all need to give ourselves a bit of a break, because a lot's been thrown at us in the last few months that was really unexpected. And even just in general, I think there's life in the 21st century is not easy. And so I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves to reach, that things should be easier and things should be better, and that basically that things should be perfect. And there is no perfect. So keep that in mind. Things are always evolving, and really all we want to do is what's the next step that we can take? What's something that we can do to make something better? And if you're living and working that edge and constantly doing, even if you just do one step to improve things, changing one factor in an equation changes the whole value of a mathematical equation. So this is science. You change one thing, everything changes. Nothing's the same anymore. And one of the points I'm going to be talking about today, I actually literally at the top of the hour, just before I was logging into this meeting, a friend from Bali wrote saying, "I finally moved the desk as you told me years ago, and I can't believe it took me this long, and I cannot believe how instantaneous the change is. Nothing else had changed in the environment. I look forward to working now. I love the look of the room. I love the feel of the room." And he's like, and there's this inner shift that has changed, and it was one change. So that's one of the key pieces I'm going to be talking about today. And we all know that our homes are not necessarily designed in this way, and some of the changes might not be easy. So I've got all the, what's the next best thing? What's the next best thing? And that's always a thing to keep in mind. So, if there's one little step that you can take, one hint that I give that you're able to apply, that would be fantastic. So I'm just going to start up a slideshow over here, and then we can get started. So really, and I'm aware, Sarah was telling me as well that, we don't want to just look at maybe, the student spaces, but also some of you working parents as well. It'll be really useful to look at, what are the commonalities and how can we apply these principles for everybody's well-being. So let's take a look. This, you can probably figure out, is not an ideal setup. I support healthy snacks and all of that sort of thing, but right place, right time, and all of that. So what this person is demonstrating is the fact that, there's a need for comfort, so the teddy bear's there, so that's something. There's a need for nourishment, that's great, but you want your environment to nourish you, and you want a level of organization to at least support the primary function of the space and what it is that you want to do. Years ago, it was featured in the 24 Hours magazine. It used to be a free magazine that was distributed. This was the Toronto edition, talking about home tips. And this is just a couple of the points. It was a bit of a longer feature. And these are just a few of the ideas that I want to impress upon you that I think can really help make a big difference. And so, you'll have this in the recording so you can read with a bit more leisure. Color is one really key piece that I'm going to talk about a little bit later as well, that, instead of things just being functional, having some color makes a big difference. I think it's one of the reasons kids are attracted to candy at the checkout counter at the aisle is just the color. And when you bring color and you bring aesthetic appeal into something that's functional, you actually lift yourself out of survival mode. You're not just getting by. Anything that you do that's aesthetic, that's also functional, helps something that's practical also take on a bit of a more embodied, lived in, appreciated nature. So that's why I was talking about those colorful file boxes there. And the other thing about having boxes like that is that you don't need to see things until you need to see them. So especially if you're now working from home and in the kitchen or, in the dining area or somewhere like that, having good storage so that you only have out what you need at that moment. In that case, you can have stuff on your desk. That's not clutter. Clutter is when it's not being used. And
can you say that again? Say that one more time.
Clutter isn't just, there can be chaos in the moment. And that's because things are being used and there's an aliveness to tasks that are happening. So you can have papers on your desk. Right now, I've got papers on my desk related to this. I've got my coffee cup here and I've got, a clipboard. And I've got some other things because they're being used. Now, when I finish my work for the day, those things can go away because they're not being used. But when things stay where they are and are not being used and it's not the right place for them, or there isn't a right place for them, any combination of those three factors can create clutter. So having baskets, having things out of sight, out of mind until you need them is really, really helpful. I talk about defined borders here. And this is something where if you have a large enough space and your child has, and we have some photos for this coming up. If your child has, a big enough room to be able to have a desk and you want to delineate a really special study area, having an area rug for the study area and maybe a separate area rug if there's space for the play area is really useful. That's also fantastic if your children play in the living room. There's a carpet and that becomes the play area and the Lego is not allowed off that carpet so that you as a parent are able to walk around the space without that attack of the killer Lego hitting your feet. Which
I think you actually can die from that.
It's one of the leading causes apparently. So, but having this area rug, what that does is without a hardness, it actually it teaches appropriate boundaries. It teaches kids how to respect space and how to respect boundaries. And because the carpet's soft and it's not a hard wall, and it actually helps to teach a boundary with softness and flexibility, but still precision. So it's really, really useful to have that if possible, again.
Can I just add in, I think that as parents, we kind of know that in a way because in the younger years at school, you know, they have rug time, right? Where there's a space where they all gather and
Okay.
sit on the floor with the teacher and
Uh-huh.
have that circle and that connection time. So in a way, a lot of our students, even if they're older and they're not, you know, still having it at school, that's part of their experience of what orients them to activity and space.
Fantastic. I mean, really, you know, what feng shui is, you know, this is about the alignment between, you know, what's the space, what's being done there, and how it fits. And so what you're describing, you know, when that carpet becomes, you know, that desk is a work area and your bed is not a work area, you know, and the play area is the play area. And the bed is not the play area for Lego and so on and so forth. So it's a matter of having that clear functionality and that
Hmm.
fit. And so those subtle messages, even just color coding, you know, you can have, you know, you work with the colors around the desk that's different than what the colors are in the rest of the space. It sets a signal, you know, that you start to see that space differently. Then there's lighting as well. I am not a huge fan of fluorescent lighting because it actually doesn't cast a shadow. So it literally throws off your depth perception. So having good lighting is important, and be mindful and see, you know, everybody's a little bit different. We'll take a look at a couple of lamps later on in the presentation if I remember when we get to those desks. But, you know, spotlights can actually possibly be off-putting because it feels like, you know, those FBI investigations where they're shining the light bulb in your face. Depending on your child's sight and the lighting in the room and so on, it might work. Or having this kind of, there's this tube lighting that we show over here, you know, where it's just the ambient light that's shining through, or there's a lampshade. That might be softer and gentler for your child's eyes and also for yours. I am not a fan of this kind of desk light that's pointing the beam and it feels a little bit, you know, it can feel a little oppressive. But if with the right bulb, with the right kind of lamp, that can absolutely be fine. So again, it's up to personal preference. So let's take a look at this setup that had so inspired my friend in Bali, and which you as well mentioned, Sarah, that you'd put into place as well. And this is the seat of power. You'll notice also, actually, this desk has a carpet underneath it as well, which
Mm.
also helps delineate the space. But you never see a successful company president sitting with their back to the door or with their desk up against a wall. The desk is always open in the middle of the space, facing the door, and there's a wall behind. And this is the setup that I've got here as well, so that I can face the door to this office and see what's coming my way. And so literally that translates into a whole mindset where you can see what's coming your way and you feel supported from behind. When your back is exposed, your nervous system realizes there's the possibility of some threat, that there is this openness behind you, can't control what's going behind you, or something behind you might surprise you as parents of kids. And so being able to see what's coming your way literally sets you up for being able to see what's coming your way in general. Not necessarily winning lottery tickets, I wish, but you know, still a little bit more of just that sense of support and forward vision. So, I mean, even a sideways desk like this is pretty amazing. I mean, wow, what a kind of, this is fun.
I would take that any day.
Wouldn't we all? Courtesy of wayfair.ca. You know, thank you very much, guys, for this beautiful example. But you know, that just shows this very clear. You know, again, the carpet is delineating the area. There's a plant there, which adds some decor. Everything's beautifully sort of presented. You know, and I realize, you know, space and kids, and you know, will we really be able to do this? It's nice to be able to see what can be done. And to see, you know, and especially if you have more space, you might be able to set something like this up. Now, here we have an example actually from, if I may share, from Sarah's living workspace. And this is her youngest working away. And just notice how there is this actual sense of confidence. Like he's got a wall behind him and he's looking into the middle of the room. And there is this just clear sense of support of having that openness in that position. Also, I love that you've got those storage containers there. So, you know, you don't need to look at the stuff until you need it. Plants as well. which add a decorative element. I'm going to say this about now before I forget about plants and flowers and those kinds of decorative objects. As soon as you do something that's appealing and decorative, that's not necessary. We don't need plants, we don't need flowers, but when you go to the trouble to do that, you lift yourself out of basic survival mode and just functional mode into, basically telling yourself that you can enjoy what it is that you're doing and enjoy the space that you're in.
Can I just point out something, Mark, that when you gave me that feedback in my office years and years ago about the seat of power, that it was dramatic, the shift the next day in my ability to focus and the calmness. And so I know that, a number of our students work with sensory integration as a piece. Certainly that, is part of actually the exercise most of the students are working on this summer with clocks, what we call symbol relations, which is being able to integrate information quickly, and that added pressure of lots more things in their space that are kind of disjointed and not knowing what's going on behind you. Like it just puts so much, it increases the volume that they're trying to integrate all that time. But it shifted it for me. And so I've never forgotten that, certainly in my own workspace, but with my children. But the compartment with the baskets actually was your idea for our space in this house years and years ago. But we only got it going last summer. It took, we're maybe a little bit slower to make the move, but I never forgot. So everybody has 2 baskets. And we call them, your mess basket in a way, but that's where all the hats and, they're not always being used properly. You can see the hoodies on the floor there, but the idea is they all have a spot for their hoodies and their hats and their gloves and all of the above. I'm listening.
No, absolutely, and it does take time. But if you take note, if you can, one step at a time, if you're able to do just a little something, it makes a big difference. So we can see that, and we can see that with his focus and his attention. And of course, we don't necessarily want cables or hoodies. Or again, there's no perfect. It's in flux. It's in movement. This is the sort of the life that we're all living right now. So now here's another one from Wayfair. So this is what's really common. We're going to see a desk up against a wall. The rug really helps to delineate the space, as well as, some color and art and some fun stuff. But, this kind of small desk, you can actually even put that on a rug. You could even rotate it and move things around. And then when you're using it, and then put it back in its place when you're not. The one thing I would caution in this particular case is, if this child is going to sit with their back to the door, I would not have an open, a sort of a seat without a back, because then they're going to feel a lot less supported. But, I realize that in many cases, we're going to have the desk up against a wall. Some of the things that you can do, if you put really cheerful, enlivening art or things like that up there, that's helpful. Something reflective is really great, because then you can behind you, and that helps fulfill one of the purposes that the seat of power arrangement would do if you were facing the door that you can see. But then if you have to face the other way, that mirror helps you see behind you. So then that answers that kind of question. Then same with a beautiful map or something else that's inspiring to sort of, something that's encouraging. I love charts, for kids, if it's something colorful that charts their progress or that's really motivating or inspiring for them. And plants as well. That's really grounding, because, we come from nature, and having something that expresses itself as naturally as a plant and produces oxygen and so on and so forth, that's also really grounding. Of course, make sure that it's not a risk for the technology that's nearby, and it's going to be, of course, age appropriate and so on. But and space appropriate. Don't clutter your desk. If you have a tiny desk, don't put a plant that takes up half the space in the desk and then you can't work properly. So always has to be functional. And then if there's that extra step that you can take to personalize the space, that's helpful. If you're working at a dining table, one of the things that you can do, because you really want to be able to shift gears from this is a workspace at one point, and then this is a dining space. So I would use, for example, a placemat. This specific placemat I would use when working, and it would swap out the placemat and all the work material, goes off the table, and you use different placemats for when you are eating there. So you're literally changing the space. Now, if you think that you're working from home now, and normally going to work, you would spend a certain amount of time commuting. Some of that time, like maybe 2 minutes or 5 minutes, could be spent dressing up the space. It's not a lot of time, but that time that you spend, you will more than gain in productivity and alignment while you're in flow and in task.
I love that.
Yeah, it really makes a difference. And this was actually taken, this was in my space when I was working a very busy period before I had like trips literally on one trip, Romania, Japan, and Australia, you know, for a 7-week period. And I needed to work away from my desk. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do a little work at the dining table. And so I set it up, lit the candles, which again took me out of survival mode. But I was working at nighttime, and it helped create sort of, you know, a softer atmosphere. Now, personalizing and organizing, we can do both at the same time. And this is that shift, as I said, into some individuality, but also out of obligation and survival mode. So color is really important. You know, there's a lot of plastic stuff available, that's fine. But, you know, this clear plastic thing, when you can actually just do something, even at the dollar store, you just get something colorful like that green container. It really makes a huge difference to create an enlivening workspace that's not just blah, right? And especially not just kids, adults love color as well, right? So doing something to spark up the space. Again, instead of just functional ones, this is also from Wayfair. You know, some colorful file holders can make a real difference. That's kind of what's been happening here. If you look on the desk over there, sort of the little glass jars that are holding some of the items over there, the little box holding some things which could probably even be more colorful, be painted. One of the things I love about this is this person has chosen their favorite color, right? There's some very clear pink and accented the whole space. But there's one step that I find the most fascinating here. If you take a look at the computer, notice how the little, where people usually put a Post-it to cover up the webcam, this person put a decorative golden leaf. So actually gone to the trouble of something for, you know, that's really just practical and made that decorative. And that just changes the whole atmosphere. You know, so those little steps, again, I'm not saying, you know, you guys have to like, you know, drive half an hour to go buy like little stickers like that. But, you know, next time you're out, if you find something that you can use to, you know, these little decorative things can make a big difference, right? And just the statement, the personalization, the fact there's practical stuff there and maybe something decorative that it speaks to whoever is there. Even the garbage can under the table is that pink. The chair has been made, you know, something to soften the chair, just like you and I were talking before we started filming, Sarah. You know, this cloth was made by a Japanese Feng Shui student of mine who is an interior designer, and this is what I cover my computer with when I turn it off at night. But having it behind me as well, it just creates something that's a bit more decorative and beyond just practical. Flowers as well, again, at no risk to the technology, those beautiful little containers for holding practical items. And for kids, you know, you're not necessarily going to use glass, you're not necessarily going to use flowers, but you find something that's age appropriate, right? These concepts translate across age. And again, a lamp, you know, if you want to do the spotlight one, I mean, you couldn't get one more beautiful than that. So it's a matter of choosing something that fulfills your need and maybe also has an aesthetic quality. And if you can get those both happening at the same time, it's quite wonderful. And then something that speaks to your personality or your character, like, you know, a paperweight that's actually just a little airplane instead of just, you know, something. I'm just going to reach over at my desk. I've got, you know, I hold my USB sticks in this little sort of golden turtle kind of tray, which I bought in Japan for like $5 or something at some amazing little dollar store. So, you know, something that's, again, serves a purpose that maybe also speaks to you and maybe is also attractive. So the basics, you want the space to be clear and organized, but again, go easy on yourself and recognize, you know, if your space is in the middle of being used, you know, there's an aliveness to a certain level of what we might describe as mess. It's not mess, actually. It's just creative process. But when the time is done, then those things go back. Benjamin Franklin, one of the most productive people in the world, had in his daily schedule at the end of the day, return things to their places. That was a thing that was written in his schedule. And he was mindful of the fact that if you use something, you should then put it back. It seems so basic, but you know, a lot of us will do things like that in the middle of doing other things or haphazardly, or we forget. But actually having dedicated time, if you even spent 5 minutes just putting things back, nothing else, you're not checking your phone, you're not doing anything else, not talking to people, just putting things back. It's amazing what that does.
We're really trying to work on that in our family, and as individuals in the family, where the task is the entire process. It's not just the sort of doing of the part that everybody else sees of the task. It's like the closing your drawers or the whatever those, like you said, putting those pieces away. And I think, you know, so frequently I dismiss that time.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, I can clean that all up later. And of course I can, but then it all adds up, and it actually is more challenging for everybody involved than,
Totally.
than doing it as you go along. Can I ask you a question about color partway through this?
Yeah.
Is this okay?
This is just the review, so we're wrapping up. So yeah, anything.
Okay. So how do you know when you've added, maybe too much color is not quite the right word, but I know, you know, in Montessori education and certainly in Arrowsmith classrooms, we really try to reduce the stimulus load, and we've got sort of a gentler color scheme in. But how do you know when you've added too much color?
Well, that's, you know, the proof is in the pudding, in a sense of, you know, what are the results that you're getting. So this is something where, you know, you have to go according to, you know, what your philosophy is, what's going to work. You know, it doesn't have to be, you know, your home doesn't need to look like a Rubik's Cube. You don't necessarily want that. You know, like that pinkish desk, she went for one tone or one color, and that was, you know, a phenomenal effect. So it doesn't have to be bright, doesn't have to be garish, doesn't have to be all over the place. And, you know, you see my hand because of everything around it that's not my hand. And so you're going to see color, whatever color you use, because of everything around it that's not that colorful. So you don't have to go overboard. It can literally just be that green pencil holder is it, right? Or that one, you know, the mouse pad might be the colorful thing. So, you know, whatever is going to work. And so is, yeah, absolutely not to overload, but to inspire. So yeah, it's absolutely a matter of discernment. And so this is where, you know, what's important with Feng Shui and the challenge with how it can be seen in the media and, you know, when you just read stuff online, is everybody needs to do the same thing. And that's not the case. Everybody needs to do what's appropriate for them, which isn't always necessarily what we think, because it might be something outside of our comfort zone that's actually really more nurturing. But so it's a matter of experimentation. So thanks for that. It is really important. So yeah, don't go the whole Rubik's Cube route, you know, an Easter egg basket kind of thing that you have to do. That's not what you have to do. So clear and organized, again, according to, you know, whatever the time frame is and the task at hand. Good lighting being, you know, whatever good works for you, making sure that you can see, and just being aware. We might be unconscious of the fact that, you know, staring at a light bulb actually can be triggering and feel a little bit oppressive, rather than having that ambient light shining through a lampshade. The supportive desk position as much as possible. If you are working in the kitchen or the dining area, you might literally just choose the seat that allows you to see the door. And if you're working side by side with your child and you're both there, you know, at times, maybe giving that seat to the child will really help boost their confidence. Or you swap out and you try. So, you know, try it. If you have like 4 seats at your dining table, practice sitting in all 4 seats and seeing what works. And, you know, maybe try for a couple of hours at a time or a day at a time and see what it is that's going to be supportive and see what really resonates best for you. Delineate zones, and this is going to include, again, if you're working in the living room because you don't have that space, or in the dining room, you know, do something to dress the space for work. So it could be those placemats or the candles or the lamp that's on. You know, I have a lamp in my office, and you know, and it's openly connected to the next room. And, you know, when I'm done work, computer gets powered down, this beautiful cloth goes on it, the lamp goes out, and that's it. And so it's like, you know, the office is closed. So do a little something so that you then are actually, you know, you're working from home, but you're not living at work. It's a really important distinction. And
I
I know
think you
that's,
cannot say that too many times right
I
now.
was
And
just
what a
gonna
gift
say.
for our children too. They're doing school at home, but they're not living at school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a really big one. And then color, right? Color being one thing. And what I mean by color, again, it's not necessarily the Rubik's Cube thing, but we need our hearts sing when we see colorful flowers or colorful objects or something. So even if it's just one tone or one thing that you can do to enliven your space, and to make your space practical, personal, and yes, playful even for adults, because it helps us to relax when we're realizing we're not in an environment that has to be austere. And when our personality is reflected in the environment, we can bring the best of ourselves to what it is that we do. And so you said, Sarah, that you might have a couple.
Yes, I've got a couple of questions. You know, we've been doing online school now in British Columbia and Canada, certainly since mid-March. Sorry, it started at the end of March, beginning of April. We got the announcement mid-March that schools would be closed. And, you know, overall, we were really impressed with how well the sort of online classroom environment worked for our students. Both they had, you know, even though Arrowsmith classrooms are really quite quiet and low disruption, being in their own space and not sad not to be around their friends at school, but not having any other people around, they were really able to focus more, and just the teacher ratio, it worked really well. Some of the things, there were two sort of trends that I saw that parents had to figure out. And one certainly was not an issue in the heart of Vancouver, where we live in these, you know, little tiny, you know, like we got 900 square feet in our house here, and I'd give my left arm for a second bathroom, but also first world problems, grateful to have the bathroom we have. Where we're sort of all on top of each other, you know, that the lighting in the space is best in the kitchen, but then I find, you know, if I need to make snacks for them or lunch, then I'm in there disrupting their workspace. And also my youngest one, you know, still benefits from working beside me, where I can kind of be like, you know, hey, keep going, even though there's a teacher working with him online. And so I mean, you've shared some excellent tips about how you delineate zones within a zone not set up for that. So I'm actually going to start implementing some of those things around the placemats and the containers on the table that get put out for school and then taken away. That's really brilliant. I think, so that was one issue I saw, and I think you've actually spoken to that quite a bit. The other issue that is a little more foreign to me is where families that have bigger houses and bigger living spaces, and, you know, we would see where, I mean, it actually worked quite well overall, but you'd occasionally see where like a child would be doing their schoolwork in their own space, in their own room, and the parent would be working in their space, in their own room. But as the child's reasoning increased, they started to realize that they could like do the required schoolwork and reach their goals, and also maybe do some like video gaming or be watching YouTube videos simultaneously. And in a way, that was progress for them, right? They were still doing the work they needed to do, but it's a little bit heartbreaking when you think of all the other work they could have done in that space, rather than just maintaining the status quo while expanding their ability to multitask, which, as we know, multitasking actually doesn't exist. You know, you're either doing one thing or you're doing something else. And the parents and the teachers could not catch that piece, because the parent and the child were working in sort of completely different spaces in the house.
Right.
And I wondered if you had any advice for parents who are in that situation where they maybe have an office space the child can go physically and do schoolwork in, and if the parent gets absorbed in a work call or just in a task, they're not going to necessarily have their eye on the child in that way.
So if it's a matter of, how do we set limits on kids, engaging in non-academic tasks when it's academic time or something like that. I mean, I just got out of a meditation retreat where we were using Zoom, but no other internet. And it takes discipline. One of the things that can be done is, you set up a website blocker at certain times. So as long as they're not using YouTube for school, then YouTube is actually blocked at a certain time of the day. And, that there's a conversation around this, and that, then it's like, yeah, that's the reward, is you're going to get that time. So they don't feel that they're missing anything, that, let's see. And maybe, the more that gets done, it depends on what sort of, how the reward sort of, thing works in each individual home, or within, the Arrowsmith sort of philosophy, in terms of, rewarding that sense of, that actual real world accomplishment. So that's really going to depend. I think that it can be challenging, and of course, being at home and having internet, which did not exist when you and I were in school. I mean, we were like, you didn't text people, you passed real notes. I mean, it was a very different kind of world, and we all just wanted to have that pen that had 3 colors. We were happy with that.
That was a major distraction.
that was a major distraction, as opposed to this really expensive thing.
I don't know how teens are doing it now.
Everybody owned, nobody owned anything as expensive as this. So it's challenging. I have a friend who set up the limit for himself to have an app blocker. Like, he was spending too much time on the phone, and so at 9 p.m. his phone would block Facebook, Instagram, and all of those apps.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So there is something that can be done. There's basically, you might have to do a workaround that then, YouTube or whatever those things gets done, that's not at that time, and maybe at lunchtime, then you get to do that while you're having lunch, or you get to do that after school, or, but I think there needs to be a conversation, and not taking away something per se, but simply, just like I was talking about, it's not clutter if it's the right space and the right time, but, what's the right space and the right time?
That really opens it up for me again. And this is, I think, when I work with you, what it always comes back to is there's the physical space, but not to get locked on that it's the physical space, it's everything sort of flowing out from that. So you're talking about almost like the Feng Shui of our technology, and the organization of that. And
the physical space is not just the physical space. The physical, what you're able to do, and the quality of experience that you can have in the physical space is that meta level of what that physical space can provide. So, your bedroom is not just the place with the bed. The bedroom relates to your relationship with rest, your relationship with sleep, your relationship with self-care, your relationship with romance, your relationship with anything else that room has to do with, and same with your workspace. And so when you enhance the experience there, you're actually enhancing an inner relationship with whatever the tasks are. So what is your relationship with work? I mean, the word work has a lot of charge for a lot of people. The word school has a lot of charge as well, and study, and it is this feeling, and I had that word in the presentation, about obligation and shifting from obligation, because these are things that our society, in a sense, is structured in a way that it obliges us to do this, and so there's that feeling of no choice. And so as soon as you bring in some choice, what's the color that I would like to have here? What's a decorative object I would like to have here? You start to actually enhance your making choices around something where you seemingly have no choice. And you're shifting your relationship then internally through your shifts with the external space.
So I'm so stimulated by everything you're saying. And this happens every time I work with you, that it's like, I've heard this before, but I'm hearing it for the first time, and it's landing in a different way. So I just want to highlight for the people watching this later, the impact we've all gone, I mean, the issue with COVID globally, obviously the illness and the death, I mean, it just cannot, we can't ignore that. Like, the mass tragedy on a global scale is just immense. One of the other pieces we're all dealing with is we have brought school and work into our home, and there's more than just the chaos of the delineation of time, where you're trying to be on a call with them, work colleagues, and then your child has a question about their schoolwork or wants a snack, or they just want your attention. And, so there's the that level of challenge. But what we're talking about is an emotional integration of our spaces where we do have work in the home now in a different way. Like we sort of already had that a bit with our smartphones and emails in that sort of ballooning, but this is the next step. So part of what we're all dealing with, if we are fortunate enough to be able to do work from home, is a different level of integration. And our children are as well. And I had not really thought about the emotional impact of that. So Mark, do people, when you work with them, do they talk about this being like a counseling session?
It is in a sense. Several people have told me that this is like a counseling session because, I can see by looking at the space and seeing where, where's the flow and where's the friction, I can see kind of what's going on. And start to make extrapolations about that. And then what we want to do is, we reverse engineer the space for, how would it be, when you could, when the space is aligned such that it would create that desired emotional or, overall mental and, holistic state. And so, yeah, people do sometimes say that it is like a kind of counseling. And, the thing that I'll also highlight as well is, just to repeat, no judgment. And if you can be really gentle with yourselves, like, we've all been thrown in head first into this completely unexpected, set of circumstances that's tragic. And yet, if we are fortunate enough to still have a roof over our heads, we still have work, we have our health, knock wood and everything else, then, okay, what can we do? There's no choice about some things, and there are places within that new container where we can make a choice. And so my invitation is, again, any of these aesthetic or personal touches that you can add then take you out of that basic survival level, which is what created this whole circumstance. This is all around survival and well-being and illness and, not getting sick, not having anything. So there's automatically the fact that we're working at home, that level of thought is still kind of lurking in the background. So if you can use something to make the space as enjoyable and simultaneously practical as possible, and being gentle with yourself as you're doing it, that there's no perfect, there's no ideal, there's no finished, we're all adapting. Then, but each step that you take, at the very least, there's that feeling, if you're taking a step, there isn't that feeling, the oppression of the no choice or the obligation or the some of the weight of what's happening in the overall that's, related to all of this.
So Mark, I know how to get a hold of you and I will, because, I'm now in a role where I work from home, and, I think I'm going to need some additional support once I've sort of established that a bit more. But I've got my boys, working on an intensive school program from home in the mornings this summer. Mm-hmm. And then every parent, no matter what country, what district you're, where you're living, actually globally, you're going to be dealing with the uncertainty of how much they're actually at school in brick and mortar site and how much they're working from home. And a lot of parents are actually just choosing to do a hybrid model regardless moving forward. So all of us are facing, probably a couple years going forward where school from home is a reality. Even if they have the sniffles, they're not going to be allowed to go to school. They're going to be doing some work from home. So if other people want to get a hold of you, is going to your website the best way?
senseofspace.com is my website. Unfortunately, my web guy moved to Hong Kong, and then it was like, boom, protest, COVID, all of that sort of stuff. So he's been so immersed in everything. There's a challenge with the contact form on my website, I'm sorry to say. So that contact form is currently not working at the time that we're filming this, but mark@senseofspace.com, the email address does work.
Okay.
That's there on the contact form, so I've put it there so people can see it. So just so you know, if you actually send me an email, mark@senseofspace.com, the phone number there works as well. And as we've seen, we've all been adjusting to online. I've actually been doing distance consultations for 15 years. So, I had people who used to mail me remember photographs?
Vague memory.
So, but I've been doing tons of Zoom, Skype, FaceTime sessions. I had a Costa Rica last month, and and as I said,
Okay.
I had the Bali contact finally, after a couple of years, sort of finally put things into place.
Mhm.
So it's amazing what can happen. And even, I can see your space right now, behind you, and love the blue pot that's right behind your head. And so
It's a little cluttered, but it's got
it's a
some of the
love.
elements cluttered, and that some of that actually is clutter. But I made notes. I know what I can do once we get off this call.
And no shame, no blame, and
Yeah.
it's just you take the step, and when you can do better, you do better, and that's it.
Well, thank you, Mark. Lovely as always. So informative, so inspiring. And again, I'll put Mark's email in the email out with this link, so you can certainly reach out and contact him. And you've given us all so much to think about, and feel really empowered to further support myself and my family and the school that I work for going forward in this way. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you.